going on, you bunch of heathens? Today we are checking out a new channel for me, theohuntt, but I saw it on my recommended and it seemed interesting. How did the military fall in Walking Dead? Honestly, good question, because I honestly have no idea. I stopped watching after, God, who was it? Beth died? In whichever season that was, season 5 or something. I got upset enough that Beth died, and I was like, okay, I'm not fucking watching this shit anymore. And everything I've heard is that it's a good thing I stopped because it's just not good anymore. Either way, make sure you go check out his channel and the original. It's linked below. No further ado, let's jump in.
Now, the zombies we see in the world of The Walking Dead, post-season 1 that is, because those things were absolute menaces to start off with, are generally slow-moving and lethargic creatures, or walkers as they're referred to in the show. And I'm sure most people watching this video...
I think the biggest issue... See, the thing with The Walking Dead, I just remember this. I mean, the biggest issue is the fact that technically everyone's infected, so even if you die, it's still good, it's brought back, but it's not... I don't know. I feel like it wouldn't be that easy. It wouldn't be that hard to deal with, I wouldn't think.
Know exactly how the story starts. Rick wakes up in his coma to find the world has fallen into disarray. But exactly how did this happen? How did these slow-moving creatures manage to overthrow arguably the world's strongest military? Well, today we're going to look into just that question. This is how the military fell in the world of The Walking Dead. A quick disclaimer before I begin this video properly, I'm only going to be talking about the TV universe military and not the comic book one. But with that being said, let's
Thank you, because I remember looking in to the this before, and they bring in the comics a bit, and everything about the comics kind of fucking confuses me, so it's hard for me to really understand, if you know what I mean.
In The Walking Dead, much like in real life, is made up of the 5 services. You have the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and of course the Coast Guard. And according to dialogue from many characters within the TV universe, put very simply, the military were ultimately overrun by the sheer number of the dead. But let's look into how they handled the outbreak in the initial days. The main show glosses over most of the initial...
God, I will say this shot from the first season is such a fucking... this is such a great shot. The fact going in is completely empty, and it's just a pile up of cars as far as you can see trying to get out. Makes this such a great fucking shot. I just realized this car's facing the wrong way. This is just such a... And the destroyed train, it's so good.
Outbreak, but thanks to Fear the Walking Dead, we know this. During the onset of the virus, as local law enforcement was being overwhelmed, an apparent executive order was made to declare a state of emergency, as it most likely became evident that FEMA could no longer handle things on its own, and the US military responded to FEMA's pleas and stepped in to help. Now, the military's initial strategy was to evacuate and protect as many civilians as possible, ferrying them to designated safe zones or large cities where aid stations and refugee centres were located at. However, with the addition of hindsight, we now know what a fatal mistake this would be. See, what we are dealing with here is the wildfire virus, a disease thought to have originated in France that resurrects its hosts after death, causing them to attack any living organism.
Wildfire virus. And I thought it was a space virus, or is that a comic book thing? I thought I remember hearing somewhere that it was a space virus.
In order to spread the secondary infection. The virus initially transmits through airborne particles and causes the host to become an asymptomatic carrier, which is essentially someone who shows no symptoms. And the host would carry this disease until death. But the disease can also be spread through bites and scratches from reanimated hosts, as this will in turn cause you to fall ill and die within around 48 hours of contact, and after death you will also reanimate as a walker. So the military's plans of squeezing everybody into the cities like sardines went about as well as you'd expect.
Yeah, bad idea.
People were dying everywhere and would reanimate, infecting tens, maybe even hundreds of people. This would eventually accumulate to masses fleeing the city, clogging up all the roads leading in and out. it was a complete mess, and the military were authorised to use deadly force to regain control. And this resulted in major cities and roads being bombed or destroyed by jets, helicopters and soldiers firing on any unarmed civilians, whether they were infected or not. And this would in turn of course lead to mass casualties that would rise again and wreak havoc in the cities. And this was the story across the majority of America as we know. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the fall, let's take a look at these military safe zones and where they were set up. Now once again we learn much more about this in Fear the Walking Dead, but there is however one shown in the pilot episode, that being King County in Georgia. These safe zones, heavily in quotation marks, were established to manage the civilian population and try and...
You know, after however long this has been, because I forget how long it's been since, like, this happened, 9 months-ish, I want to say? That is a remarkably clean helicopter for being out in the fucking Georgia weather.
Heavily in quotation marks, were established to manage the civilian population and try and take back parts of the city. However, many of these were abandoned, whether...
God, I miss OG Season 1 Rick. OG Season 1 Rick was like a different beast.
Orders
I loved
or
him.
out of necessity, we may never know.
Or he started fucking going
however,
crazy.
That the King County safe zone was initially very successful in managing to contain the amount of walkers in the area, as numerous bodies
it seems a
wrapped in
lot
sheets
smaller.
seen within the loading dock of the hospital suggest they were taking no chances. Nevertheless, the army lost a significant number of soldiers due to the high amount of undead and decided to pull out. Many of those who were infected or came into close proximity of them were indiscriminately executed within the hallways of the hospital, as witnessed by Shane Walsh, who attempted to carry out an unconscious Rick to safety. And it does seem like Atlanta became a priority for the military to defend, due to the existence of the CDC, which would make an appearance in episodes 5 and 6 of season 1 of the main show. But like mentioned...
Oh, it was that soon? I didn't realize. Well, yeah, it makes sense. It's just, to me, it doesn't feel like only episode 5 and 6. That's it. It's so weird to me that it was that soon after.
Yeah, we get the most information about these safe zones from Fear the Walking Dead, as we see the epidemic from the Clark family located in Los Angeles. Quickly realizing it would be impractical to save everyone, the National Guard in Los Angeles abandoned most of the city and concentrated their resources on easy to defend areas, setting up 12 secure fenced off safe zones
that makes
9
sense.
days after Monument Day. These were all places they could provide basic services and protect the remaining populations, whilst also setting up designed military facilities like the hospital scene at Raynard Community College. The people who refused to be evacuated to the said safe zones either made their ways out of the city, were killed by infected, or were flat out executed by the guards due to their potential exposure to the virus. And these safe zones initially seem to be effective, as in Fear, Sergeant Moyes tells the civilians they're making good progress pushing back the dead. However, we see fatigue, a lack of sleep and supplies would start to plague the soldiers, who were fighting against an enemy that were utterly relentless. And the military found themselves in an increasingly precarious position as the number of infected grew and manpower started to dwindle, either through desertion, death or infection, leading to the military initiating Operation Cobalt and evacuating all personnel from major cities.
What, are they just firebombing LA?
Operation Cobalt,
sorry, I kind of went quiet there, didn't I?
Protocol was the campaign devised by the Department of Defenses and enacted by the US military to contain the spread of the wildfire virus. Now, the operation launched during the early hours of August 28, 2010, after the collapse of civilization. But due to how quickly the virus had taken over, the military weren't quite sure what they were dealing with.
Hey, at least your finger's out the trigger, person.
Seemed to be working relatively effectively were abandoned. The military were quickly reverted in a poorly coordinated retreat, which greatly accelerated the dissolution of the army. The last military orders were issued to nuclear-propelled submarines, which now had the authority to launch nuclear weapons towards major infected zones.
What the fuck is a museum piece doing out here? I'm not even sure this shit would run.
Operation Cobalt was an attempt to wipe out the infected by dropping napalm on all major cities across the country, and nuclear force was also supposed to be used in this attack. However, these orders were never carried out due to the submarines either being abandoned or infected. So what was the outcome?
How the the fuck did they get abandoned or infected? Like that? Okay, I have a hard time believing that. Abandoned, maybe. Maybe. But actually infected? I don't understand how they would get infected.
Of Operation Cobalt? Well, it was a failure of the biggest proportions, due to the safe zones being abandoned and overran, military facilities destroyed, and massive losses of troops and equipment. Whilst the contingency plan had few chances to limit the number of infected people in the United States, it was not enough to completely halt the spread of the virus. As a result, large groups of infected individuals were in fact terminated thanks to Operation Cobalt, but an insane number were still on foot, and the operation caused more problems than it gave answers. According to a park ranger broadcasting from Shut-Eye Peak, the forests of Yosemite National Park and the Sierra Nevada mountain range were now on fire and likely to be gone within weeks. One significant outcome that occurred after the fall of California and other states west of the Continental Divide is the National Guard had essentially replaced the regular military at this point. It can be assumed that this is why a helicopter from the 7th Cavalry is seen abandoned outside the hospital where Rick was located at. In the aftermath of Operation Cobalt, the US Army...
I also just realized that's a fucking Huey. Did cavalry did they still army still use Hueys at this time? I don't think they did. No, I don't think so. Also, yeah, that's a Vietnam era Huey. Why the fuck is that there?
Dispersed at a rapid rate as military action failed to contain the virus, and the amount of desertions increased day by day. It is unknown if the US Navy had any particular role inside Operation Cobalt, but it's assumed
they definitely
that a few
would have.
days after the infection started in LA, all naval battle groups and aircraft carriers were recalled to the United States. Now, an interesting side note to mention here is following Operation Cobalt for a few weeks, rumours of an Operation Noah would spread through broadcasts, which would suggest the US government was to blame for the whole virus, accusing them of trying to control the population and getting it horribly wrong. But these were nothing more than conspiracies. So essentially, they had bombed major cities, killing the majority of survivors and increasing the number of the dead. Operation Cobalt eradicated most cities, as we found out through Okafor in The Ones Who Live, apart from Philadelphia, as him and the other pilots no longer wanted to take part in the destruction of yet another city. Okafor then in turn defected to the Pennsylvania National Guard side and bombed Lincoln Financial Field, where the Marines were planning to move into once the bombing of the cities was over. Okafor's attack killed 4,000 Marines, but it allowed the National Guard to save Philadelphia from destruction by both the military and also the undead.
That's a stupid fucking decision, because you make it seem like if Philadelphia is like the last standing major city, by that point you would already know that doesn't work. And if you didn't, there was no need to bomb them, because if you didn't bomb them, then they wouldn't have anyone to.
Subsequently, Philadelphia
it just makes no sense to me.
The Civic Republic of Philadelphia, or the CRM, and Okafor eventually became a lieutenant colonel of the Civic Republic military, which had been created out of the Pennsylvania National
Nice Apache.
Guard. In conclusion, the military in the Walking Dead TV universe fell purely due to a lack of knowledge. They had no idea what they were dealing with. People would turn within minutes or hours, and everybody was infected without knowing it. There was no cure, no immunity, and more importantly, no knowledge. And the military, despite its incredible strength and equipment such as tanks and jets, were designed for organised warfare and not fighting an enemy that never tired, never stopped, and could infect anybody. The military herded everybody into populated areas, which only made the spread worse, and by the time the safe zones had been set up, the damage had already pretty much been done. The chain of command had started to break down, soldiers started to abandon their posts, and the amount of the dead only started to grow. And the final nail in the coffin was Operation Cobalt. They pulled back every soldier in a desperate attempt to regain control, but that in turn only spread resources thinner, as the army had no directions or instructions anymore other than to get out of the cities. So ultimately, the Dead bested the strongest military on the planet due to its relentless and ever-growing sea of walkers, mixed in with some very poor decisions by the higher-ups. I mean, the Civic Republic is
Usually
living
how it
proof
goes.
that not bombing the cities and instead clearing out the Dead slowly and containing the virus where possible was the right decision to be made, as these protocols save.
Yeah, but that's usually how that shit fucking goes with the military. Like anything. The higher-ups usually fuck something up, and so the grunts get stuck with the shitty position of doing what they're told.
Philadelphia, just further highlighting.
The only thing is, I find it very hard to believe that so many U.S. cities would be bombed. Like, the fact that Philadelphia is the only one standing, I find very hard to believe simply because enough of these people would know people and family there that they would not want to do it.
The failure that was
so I find it very hard to
Operation
believe.
Cobalt. The US military didn't fall to a single battle, it slowly eroded, just like the rest of civilization. And that's how the strongest army on the planet lost to the slow lethargic creatures known as walkers. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed something a little bit different today, as the fall of the military in the Walking Dead universe is something that's always fascinated me. And I hope one day we get to see
definitely
it in slightly
fascinated
more
me
detail
too.
like was originally planned for the main show when Frank Darabont was in charge. But if you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe as we are closing in on 20.
Another thing, I definitely will give you a like. God, what was I gonna say? Another thing, I feel like the spread happened a bit too quickly. Like, don't get me wrong, I get it. Everyone's fucking infected, technically. So anytime someone dies without their brain being destroyed, then they, the virus spreads even more. My whole issue with it is, yeah, sure, that's true. But I feel like in smaller places, like sure, in bigger cities, it may spread fairly quickly, but I feel like we'd have a fucking pretty decent grasp on it. Where you'd have breakouts of a big portion, but I feel like overall, it'd be fairly fine.
20,000 subscribers, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye. Well, that was theohuntt, and honestly, really good video. There were some parts in it that just didn't make sense, but that's not on him. That's on the Walking Dead universe. But overall, really fucking good video. Make sure you guys check it out. Like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, you guys take care of yourselves. See ya.